The capital planet of the Ithel was dying slowly, not with fire and sudden ruin, but with the quiet exhaustion of a long siege. For generations, the Cathar raiders had pressed in. The Cathar were a species of pure aggression, driven by a need to expand and crush everything in their path. Their ships were crude and numerous, relying on brute force and the fear they inspired. The Ithel were the opposite. They were not warriors. They belonged to a galactic council of species that had chosen spiritual and cultural advancement over military technology. Their buildings were carved from living rock, graceful and full of light, but their shields flickered, and their defense batteries were ancient relics. They had no real fleet left. They had only myths. Deep beneath the surface of the capital city lay the summoning array. It was a massive, ancient piece of technology, almost forgotten until the siege grew deadly. The myth said this array could call the Chosen Protectors, a powerful race from a distant, unknown galaxy. They were supposed to arrive with magic, light, and grace like angels of salvation. The Ithel had used the array repeatedly over the last century, sending out silent, hopeful pleas into the void, but nothing had ever come. Now it was the final summons. The High Council gathered, their long, pale robes covering thin, fragile bodies. Elder Chian, the oldest of the council, stood at the core of the array. Chian's face was etched with worry, but his voice was steady. He gave the command, and the remaining energy reserves of the entire planet were funneled into the ancient machine. The floor of the chamber began to glow with a brilliant, blinding blue light. The light was raw, too powerful for the delicate architecture, and the stone walls around them shuddered. Elder Chian felt the energy drain out of him, a terrible emptiness as the last desperate cry left their world and shot out across the galaxy. It was a call for help, disguised by 1,000 years of faith and archaic coding, asking for champions to save them from destruction. The energy traveled hundreds of light years, crossing empty space at speeds the Ithel could only dream of. It finally reached the dark, organized edges of human-controlled space, hitting a deep space sensor array named Watchtower 7. Inside the station, the atmosphere was cold, clinical, and efficient. Technician Alex Riley, a young woman with sharp eyes, sat at her console, watching the usual traffic of cargo vessels and mining probes. Her world was governed by predictable data streams. Then, a massive spike hit the system. Alex swore softly and checked the filters. It was not a weapon signature, not a natural phenomenon, and certainly not a standard communication. It was a raw energy beacon, a near-catastrophic surge that sounded like pure terror. The power was immense, but the format was a mess, like an old radio message filtered through a dozen broken translators. It was a distress call, screaming for help. Alex logged the data immediately and sent the anomaly report up the chain of command. This was not a job for a technician. This was a job for intelligence. The signal landed on the desk of Admiral Lisa Klein 3 hours later. Admiral Klein was in charge of the Rapid Response Fleet for Sector 12. She was known for her calm demeanor and her belief that every problem, from a missing freighter to a hostile invasion, could be solved with proper force projection and logistics. There was no room for fantasy in her world. Her intelligence team quickly decoded the massive file attached to the distress beacon. They confirmed the signal was genuine and desperate. The Ithel were clearly terrified and losing a war, but the rest of the file made the human analysts smile. It was full of cultural data, ancient poetry, and prophecies about the saviors. It spoke of ethereal guidance, champions of light, and a new age of magic and grace. "They think we're going to arrive on winged horses," one analyst mumbled. Lisa Klein ignored the comment. She looked past the myth and focused on the facts. The signal was clean, but woven beneath the archaic code was something else. the raw energy signature of the attacking force. It was the energy signature of the Cathar Raiders, a known hostile entity on the fringes of galactic maps. They were brutal, expanding, and a clear threat to human security if they were allowed to grow stronger. Lisa Klein leaned back in her chair. They are begging for salvation, and they are surrounded by a hostile military threat. She closed the file. They didn't summon a peace treaty, they summoned a war. She picked up her private comms unit. Do not send a scout vessel. Prepare the rapid response fleet, full combat deployment, flagship Defender and 2 destroyer escorts. Code Red. We are not sending champions of light. We are sending protection by force. Her decision was made instantly, without doubt. The Ithel had asked for a mythical savior. Humanity was going to give them a very real army instead. The goal was not grace. The goal was survival.
The human rapid response fleet moved with quiet, terrifying speed. The flagship, the HMS Defender, was a masterpiece of military engineering. It was not built to look beautiful or inspiring. It was built to endure great damage and deliver even greater damage. Its hull was dark, its edges sharp, and it moved through the black void with a sense of heavy, unstoppable purpose. Inside the Defender, the atmosphere was a mix of intense focus and absolute calm. There was no panic, only the steady hum of powerful engines preparing for a high-risk jump across a vast distance. Captain John Miller stood on the bridge, his posture straight and his gaze fixed on the tactical display. Miller was a veteran. He had spent his life fighting small wars and securing dangerous space lanes. For him, every situation was a problem that needed a clean, brutal, and final solution. He trusted his engineers, his guns, and his own cold logic. He was not a man who believed in myths or happy endings. He believed in strategic superiority. He gathered his key officers. The ship's security officer, Kevin, the chief engineer, Chloe, and the tactical officer, Mike, stood ready. "We are closing on the jump point," Miller said, his voice low and steady. "Let's review the client and the enemy one last time. Tactical, run the analysis." Mike brought up a pale, glowing image of the Athel homeworld. "The Athel," he began, "are essentially an unarmed client. Their technology is focused inward, art, history, culture. They have been relying on an archaic summoning device for a century. The data suggests they are running out of time and resources." Miller nodded. "They are summoning a miracle. We are a hammer." He then switched the display to the enemy. The image changed to show jagged, dark shapes, the Cathar Raiders. "The enemy," Mike continued, "the Cathar, brutal, bioengineered fighting forces. Their ships are simple and built for one thing: overwhelming numbers. They rely on swarm tactics and fear. They don't negotiate, they consume. Our intelligence shows they have been attacking the Athel for 3 generations. They assume the Athel have no allies, and that any small ship they encounter is easy prey." Chloe, the engineer, leaned forward. "They have powerful kinetic weapons, Captain, but their energy shielding is inconsistent. We can crack their armor quickly if we hit the right spots." "We will not wait for them to make the first move," Miller stated, looking around the faces of his crew. "Our strategy is simple: speed, shock, and total destruction of the attacking force. They will not have time to realize what has hit them." Later, as the final checks were being made, Miller found Alex Riley, the technician who first reported the desperate signal. She was now part of the Defender's sensor team, helping filter the confusing Athel data. "Riley," Miller said quietly, "you read the cultural file. What did the Athel expect?" Alex looked up, a small smile on her face. "They expected champions, Captain. Heroes with shining armor and light-driven chariots. They expected a guiding spirit to solve their war. Miller looked out at the distant, distorted stars. And what are they getting instead? They are getting a fully armed 2,000-meter warship that runs on cold fusion and railguns. Alex understood the cold irony. They were the saviors, but they were the absolute opposite of what was summoned. They were the terrifying reality of a species that had decided practicality was the highest virtue. "We are not here to offer ethereal guidance, Riley," Miller concluded, his hand resting near a console. "We are here to deliver protection. And for the Kthar, protection looks exactly like this." He walked back to the command chair. "All hands prepare for jump, weapons green and charged. Let them see what happens when humanity answers a distress call." The massive ship tensed, ready to rip through the void and deliver its promise of armed, brutal protection.
The dark space ahead tore open. It was not a gentle tear, but a violent, silent rip, like heavy cloth pulled apart. The HMS Defender, followed by its 2 escort destroyers, did not slide out of the jump, they crashed out. The sheer power of the jump drive exit left a residue of glowing blue light that faded quickly into the blackness. For a moment, all was silent. The system they entered was busy with destruction. Directly ahead, the Aethel homeworld hung in space, a beautiful blue and green marble, but it was ugly now. Dark scars marked the surface, and columns of smoke curled into the atmosphere. Orbiting the planet was the Cathar fleet, a swarm of hundreds of ships. They were crude, like giant insects, and they were busy with the final work, firing heavy, slow-moving projectiles toward the planet below. The Cathar raiders were completely focused on their prey. The arrival of the human fleet was an event that did not fit their simple predatory logic. Their sensor officers stared at the new contacts with confusion. The shapes were all wrong, too smooth, too angular, too quiet. They were nothing like the small, scattered defense vessels they had crushed generations ago. The Cathar commander, a large, impatient creature named Vrek, barked a question. "What are those shapes? Are they more defense platforms?" His tactical officer, driven by arrogance and long years of easy victory, dismissed them. "Unknown, Commander, but they are few. Only 3 vessels. Probably a scout group from a nearby primitive colony. They are no threat. Send the 4 light cruisers to destroy them and return to bombardment duty." Vrek agreed without thinking. It was a mistake born of easy conquest. He ordered 4 mid-sized Cathar ships to turn away from the planet and challenge the new arrivals. The 4 ships moved forward clumsily, their kinetic cannons slowly warming up, expecting a quick, frightening victory. On the bridge of the HMS Defender, Captain John Miller watched the enemy's foolish response. The tactical display showed the 4 Cathar ships moving to engage. "They're sending a greeting party," Miller said to Mike, the tactical officer, his voice flat. "They don't know what they're looking at, Captain. They think we're an appetizer." Miller looked at the main view screen. The beautiful, dying planet was close. He thought of the Aethel, calling for their angels, expecting grace. He glanced at Admiral Lisa Klein's secure channel, still open from the jump. He knew her orders: no mercy, no delay, no diplomacy. "They have been bombarding that world for days," Miller said, his jaw tightening. "They need to know the price of that crime immediately. We will not waste time talking to them." He turned to his crew. "Lock all railgun batteries onto the 4 engaging targets. Chloe, bring the main reactor to 100% output. I want a full, coordinated volley. No warning shots, no comms. His security officer, Kevin, who usually preferred close-quarters combat, nodded grimly. They'll certainly get the message, Captain. Miller gave the final cold order, a complete rejection of the Aethel's hope for a peaceful champion. Fire. Show them the depth of our commitment. Kinetic dispersal at maximum velocity. The HMS Defender and its 2 destroyers did not fire energy beams. They fired iron and tungsten slugs, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light. The kinetic strike was silent in space, but the visual impact was terrifying. The 4 Cathar light cruisers, moving slowly and without real shields, were caught in the massive human firestorm. The rounds hit their hulls with the force of small asteroids. There was no fire, no explosion, just instant, total vaporization. The ships did not break apart, they simply ceased to exist, turning into clouds of rapidly expanding, superheated dust and vapor. The whole exchange, from Miller's order to the destruction of the 4 ships, took less than 10 seconds. The entire Cathar fleet stopped their bombardment. Their sensor crews went into panic, unable to process the total loss of 4 ships with 0 effort. The silence that followed was heavy and final. Meanwhile, on the Aethel homeworld, Elder Chan and the Council were still in the chamber praying by the flickering array. They had watched the sky, waiting for the light. Instead, they saw a sudden flare of dark, sharp shapes appear near the enemy fleet. They were not glowing, not angelic. They looked heavy, dangerous, and utterly alien. Chan gasped, covering his mouth with a frail hand. He saw the Cathar ships turn, and then he saw the sudden, brutal flash of the human weapons. 4 enemy vessels vanished, not damaged, but gone. The elder felt a horror colder than the threat of the Cathar. He realized his people had not summoned a gentle god. They had summoned a terrible professional killer. The savior they had received was dark, silent, and capable of impossible violence. "We summoned light," Chan whispered, his voice trembling in the sudden eerie silence of the system. The final planetary bombardment had stopped. The Cathar were reeling. The human fleet, dark and silent, now sat waiting, the destroyer of the enemy and the new, terrifying master of the system.
On the main command ship of the Cathar fleet, Commander Vrek was in a rage. 4 light cruisers gone in the blink of an eye. The destruction was impossible, unbelievable. It did not match any historical data they had on local defenses. The enemy was small, only 3 ships, but their power was immense. Vrek ignored the panic spreading through his bridge. He could not accept this defeat. The Aethel planet, their prize for 3 generations of fighting, was too close to give up now. He made a terrible decision, based on pride and fury. "Full engagement," Vrek screamed, his voice raw. "All ships, all batteries, swarm them. They are 3, we are hundreds. We will crush them with mass." The Cathar fleet responded immediately. Hundreds of jagged, dark ships turned as one, abandoning the planet to focus entirely on the new silent threat. It was a massive wave of simple, brutal aggression. They charged forward, firing their heavy, slow kinetic cannons and launching a thick cloud of basic missiles, hoping to overwhelm the human ships with sheer numbers. On the HMS Defender, Captain John Miller did not move. He watched the massive swarm of targets approaching on his tactical screen. The Cathar were doing exactly what human analysis predicted, relying on chaos and volume. "Report on the incoming mass, Mike," Miller ordered. Mike, the tactical officer, spoke calmly. Heavy inbound, Captain. Estimated 300 targets. They are attempting a general saturation attack. Energy signature is low. Propulsion is simple chemical drive. Shield status, Chloe. Chloe, the chief engineer, was focused on her displays. Kinetic shields are at full power. We can take their incoming fire for 2 hours, maybe more, Captain. Their fire is heavy but uncoordinated. Miller nodded. He did not need 2 hours. Open up, Miller said, a cold edge in his voice. Target priority. Large vessels first. Use continuous kinetic fire. Escorts focus on missile defense and engaging the smaller vessels that slip through the main field. I want a killing zone established 1,000 kilometers in front of us. Nothing crosses that line. The human fleet came alive. It was not a chaotic burst of fire, but a disciplined, terrifying act of engineering precision. The 2 destroyer escorts immediately created a shield of focused point defense fire. Hundreds of bright, accurate laser beams lanced out, vaporizing the incoming Cathar missiles and smaller, faster fighter craft before they got close enough to matter. The human fleet's advanced targeting systems meant every defensive shot counted. The HMS Defender focused on the main body of the Cathar fleet. The main railgun batteries hammered out a continuous stream of tungsten slugs. These were not the slow, heavy cannon shells of the Cathar. These were near-light-speed metal rods that delivered catastrophic impact energy. The Cathar fleet, built only for offense and relying on cheap hulls, had no chance. The heavy Cathar cruisers in the front line simply disintegrated, one after another, in silent puffs of expanding vapor. The rate of destruction was shocking. Before the Cathar ships could close the distance, dozens of their vessels were erased from existence. Their shields, designed to absorb slow impacts, simply collapsed under the sheer energy of the human kinetic rods. The Cathar fleet pressed on for a few minutes, driven by Vrek's blind fury. But as ships around them vanished, not exploded, but vanished, the simple, aggressive minds of the raiders finally understood. This was not a fight. This was a slaughter. They were not fighting champions of light. They were fighting a species that had mastered the physics of war. Mike tracked the moment the enemy broke. Captain, the main body is scattering. They are trying to flee the combat zone. Vrek's command ship is attempting to make a jump. Do not let the command ship escape, Miller said, his eyes hard. That is the head of the snake. Chloe, can we get a jump lock on them? On it, Captain. Chloe replied, her fingers flying across the console. She used the Defender's superior sensor technology to lock onto the unique energy signature of Vrek's vessel. A single, specialized guided missile launched from the HMS Defender. It did not carry a bomb. It carried a pure kinetic charge guided by a sophisticated computer brain. It closed the distance in seconds, ignoring the clumsy, failing defensive fire of the command ship. The missile hit Vrek's command ship at the moment the Cathar jump drive started to warm up. The ship was torn apart, a final massive cloud of debris confirming its end. With their commander gone, the remaining Cathar ships gave up all pretense of fighting and scattered wildly, using every bit of remaining fuel to run into deep space. Miller watched the tactical screen turn from a bright field of enemy contacts to a silent, empty blackness. The battle was over. It had lasted 9 minutes and 17 seconds. He turned to his crew, his expression showing zero pride, only quiet efficiency. Clear the field. Prepare a long-range communication beacon. We are now in control of this system. Down on the Aethel homeworld, Elder Cheenan and the Council watched the final display. The enemy leader vaporizing, the rest of the swarm running in every direction. The sky was silent now, but the silence was heavier than the bombardment ever was. The Council looked at each other.
their fear now mixed with a terrible, silent respect for the awful power they had summoned. They were saved, but they were also now completely under the power of the dark, relentless vessels that floated silently in their orbit. The angels of their prophecy were deadlier than the demons.
The council chamber of the Athol was silent. Outside, the sky was completely clear. No fire, no smoke, no distant explosions. The only sign of the battle was the deep, heavy silence where hundreds of enemy ships had just been. The dark ships of the savior race remained in their orbits, still and heavy. They did not move, but their presence was absolute. Elder Chayan stood slowly, his old body feeling the weight of the last few hours. The Cathar were gone. The fear of immediate death was lifted, but in its place was a new, cold fear. The fear of a power that was too great, too efficient, and completely unknown. A sudden, sharp tone broke the silence. The summoning array, which had just been a tool of desperate magic, was now a perfect communication device. A focused beam of light stabilized in the center of the room, creating a clear, three-dimensional image. It was a human. A woman in a dark blue uniform that looked hard and strong. She did not look like the angelic saviors of Athol history. She looked like a commander. This was Admiral Lisa Klein, who had approved the mission on the other side of space. She stood on a bright, busy bridge, but her focus was entirely on the small, silent council chamber. Elder Chayan bowed deeply, using the most respectful Athol greeting. To the great champions who answered our call, we offer the eternal gratitude of the Athol people. You have given us life. Admiral Klein did not return the bow. Her expression was firm, professional, and without emotion. Her voice was clear and direct. Elder Chayan, I am Admiral Klein. The Cathar threat in this system is terminated. We are not champions. We are a defense force. We answered your distress signal, and we delivered protection. She paused, letting the cold reality sink in. This is not charity. It is a contract. Your summons required a response, and this response comes with strict terms. My captain, John Miller, is now the temporary military governor of this system. We are not here to offer mystical guidance. We are here to ensure your survival. Chayan felt a heavy pressure in his chest. We understand, Admiral. What are the terms of this protection? Klein did not use flowery language. She listed the terms clearly, like facts from a ledger. First, humanity takes full and permanent control of all defense and security measures in the Athol system. This means our ships, our weapons, and our rules. No Athol vessels, even research ships, may enter orbit without permission from Captain Miller. She continued. Second, for the immense cost of this operation, the fleet, the fuel, and the continuous security, the Athol planet will provide humanity with a steady, agreed-upon amount of rare earth minerals and production capabilities. This is not tribute. This is payment for protection. We protect your future, and you fund our ability to do so. The council members behind Chayan began to whisper, their faces showing shock and disagreement. They had expected gifts, not demands. They had expected freedom, not control. Klein's eyes scanned the room, and she cut the murmuring short. The third and most critical term. The Athol government agrees to complete non-interference regarding our military presence. You may handle your culture and your politics, but all strategic decisions, all decisions regarding the expansion of bases, and all decisions on engaging any future threats in this region belong entirely to the human military command. You asked us to fight. Now you must let us fight our way. Chayan stared at the clear, unyielding image of the Admiral. They had summoned a myth and they had received a massive military force that spoke only of trade, resources, and absolute control. The Cathar wanted to destroy them slowly. Humanity wanted to own them completely. But the difference was this. One outcome was death. The other was life. Chayan looked at the holographic image of the woman who held their future in her hand. He thought of the sudden silent terror of the Cathar ships vanishing in the sky. "Admiral Klein," Chayan said, his voice now strong with the finality of his choice. "The cost of survival is high. We accept your terms. The Athel planet, its moons, and its resources are now under the complete military protection of humanity." Klein gave a single sharp nod of acceptance. "Wise decision, Elder." Communication terminated. The human image vanished instantly. The green light of the array turned off. The chamber was again quiet. But this time, the silence was total. The Athel were saved, but they knew they were no longer truly free. They had summoned their protectors, and now they had to live with the warships instead of the angels. Their civilization would survive, but it would survive on human terms.